Okay, make this bigger so I can see the chat screen. All right, thank you. I'll call the meeting to order at 6:06. Hi Sepka, Quanasalas, Kaki, Patanaquail. To see it all atash nenemok, mustimok, nihako shasta tamakatanaquail. Thank you all for gathering here. I like to acknowledge with my highest gratitude that we are on the people's territory of Snuneymuxw. Can't talk this evening. Snuneymuxw territory, whose people have been stewards of this land since time immemorial. Recognizing that we also serve within the territories of Snuneymuxw and Stabina alongside our Inuit and Métis relatives. We do not have any transfer of open items to the meeting agenda this evening. Additions, deletions, or change in order from anyone? Not seeing any. Is there any objection to approving the agenda? Not seeing any. So the agenda is approved unanimously. Thank you. Takes us to 7, approval of the minutes. Is there someone that would like to move the motion? Chantal, want me to read it for you?
Oh, yes.
Okay, that the minutes from the regular Board of Education meeting held on September 28th, 2022 be adopted. That's been moved by Chantal, seconded by Greg. Jessica?
Can I ask that a change be made to the minutes?
Yep, go ahead.
So on page 9, let me try to pull that up. On the motion, sorry, let me just get there. Under new business 12.2, the sentence that there's 2 sentences start with Trustee Stanley. It's the second sentence, and I just was hoping to change some of the language for clarity, because it as is reads to me at least that it's outside the RDN. So I was hoping we could say Trustee Stanley expressed concerns around traffic safety for schools located, and that's the point of change. Instead of saying outside of the municipal boundary, say within electoral areas of the RDN. Or regional district of Nanaimo. So delete after located and add in within electoral areas of the RDN. I thought that would add clarity.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any objection to that change? Greg, go ahead.
Right. Is North Oyster in the CVRD or the RDN?
CVRD.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I wonder if we could amend the suggestion to just say outside of municipal boundaries or something to that effect. Are you okay
Sure.
with that, Jessica?
Okay. So we'll put a period after boundaries and strike the remainder of that sentence. Recording secretary has that. Thank you. Okay, so motion with change is before the board. I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Number 8, section 72.3 report, that the section 72.3 report from the special closed Board of Education meetings on September 27th, October 5th, October 11th, and October 12th, and the closed Board of Education meeting on September 28th, 2022 be received. Is there a mover? Tanya, second. Chantel. Any objection to the motion? Motion carries. So announcements and reminders. The board's inaugural meeting will be held on November 8th, 2022 at 6 p.m. The business committee meeting will be held on November 9th, 2022, 6 p.m. The regular Board of Education meeting will be held on November 23rd, 2022 at 6 p.m. There's also a statutory holiday this month, November 11th, for Remembrance Day, with various activities of acknowledgement around the region. And I just would also like to acknowledge that many of our elementary students have been participating in cross-country zones around the district today and tomorrow, and so we wish them the best of luck, and hopefully the weather continues to hold for them. as well as acknowledging our secondary students who have been participating in cross-country at provincials around the province as well. So best of luck to all of those athletes and their efforts in the next couple of days. We don't have any presentations this evening. It takes us to correspondence. 11.1, electric school buses. That the Board of Education of School District number 68, Nanaimo Lady Smith, refer the above correspondence from F. Deverell to Board Chair for response. Is there a mover? Jessica? Is there a second? Elaine? Any questions on the motion? The motion, I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed? No opposition. The motion carries unanimously. Thank you. 11.2 regarding Cinnabar Valley Elementary crosswalk. That the Board of Education of School District number 68, Nanaimo Lady Smith, refer the above correspondence from L. Alley, hopefully I've said that correctly, to staff for response. Is there a mover? Chantel, a second. Elaine? Discussion? Greg?
Thank you, Chair. So I have I guess a question more than anything. So I believe this is the third, perhaps there's been more that I'm not thinking of, concern in different facilities across the district over traffic safety. And I know that we had talked previously about active transportation, and there's one of the goals, I believe it is, or activities, or in the long range facilities plan in relation to that. But I'm wondering if we should also be referring this item for a broader discussion on traffic safety and active transportation on all of our school sites to the long range facilities planning committee.
I think that's a great idea. I would suggest that we work through the motion here for our response, and then perhaps you can move a motion to that effect.
If that would be okay, I'd like to do that. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else on the motion? Okay, so I'll call the question on the current motion. Is there anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. Greg?
So, and I know normally we don't do motions on the fly, but I think this one's pretty innocuous, so I'm hoping that I'll get support. That the Board of Education of School District number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, refer the issue of active transportation and traffic safety to the Long Range Facilities Planning Committee, I believe that's the right name, for further discussion and a recommendation to the board.
Is there a second on that motion? Stephanie, did you want to speak to it?
Just briefly, so this is not a new concern, unfortunately. This has come up as a general concern across many of our facilities over the last little while around traffic safety in and around the school, parking lots, active transportation's tied into this. And I think that the Long Range Facilities Planning Committee is probably the most appropriate place for this discussion to happen. And given that there is an action related to this in the Long Range Facilities Plan.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak to the motion? Okay, so I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? The motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Takes us to committee reports, and we have 12.1 Business Committee. Greg?
Guess I should have left my mic on, sorry. Okay, so we have one recommendation coming from the Business Committee, and I'll read it. It reads as follows. That the Board of Education of School District number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, rescind the following motion. That the Board of Education of School District number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, directs staff to draft proposed boundary changes for Solaire, Rock City, and Departure Bay elementary schools, with the potential of other minor boundary shifts that would shift students away from Departure Bay for review and approval in principle, followed by community consultation and implementation for September 2023. Any students currently enrolled in Departure Bay may retain their seats in their school, as well as younger siblings, or they may transfer to their applicable catchment school as per determined boundary changes.
Is there a second? Jessica? You want to speak to it, Greg?
Just briefly, Secretary Treasurer Walsh provided us a report at the Business Committee, and essentially this is because we recognize that when we consider reopening Rutherford, which I would hope would come in the near future, that we'd be having a broader discussion around catchments around all of the schools in the North End and not just limited to Departure Bay.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on the motion? Tanya?
Turn on my camera. For the purposes of people who might be watching and for our soon to be inaugurated trustees who are here, do we have a timeline through the chair to the secretary treasurer, but when we would bring this subject back to around these issues? Piggybacking on what Greg said there.
So camera here. Oh, go to the meeting first. Apologies. You can just turn that by the way. I'm sorry.
Oh, mine's not even on. Hold on.
Everyone can hear me. So thank you for the question through the chair. So yes, so we actually just got our updated numbers from our Beauregard system as the kids that actually where they were where they are this year. So we have our enrollment numbers with specific addresses, etc., for our students. In a month's time, they're going to give us their projections, which is a typical timeline for Beauregard. We've actually already got our geospatial consultants. We sent those current numbers to them today so they can actually work on the 10-year timeline. So that if you'll recall, we've created a formula of what type of housing creates how many types of kids and where we anticipate housing to be built. Now that we've had a few years under our belts of growth and of student numbers, we're going to test to see whether our formulas are correct, redo our formulas and to make a determination. So I would suggest that we're going to be able to be coming back to the board likely in January.
Okay.
Is the goal. It could be February. I don't anticipate it being sooner than that.
Okay, thank you.
No other questions? So I'll call the question on the motion. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? The motion carries unanimously. Thank you. 12.2, we don't have anything from the Education Committee this evening. That takes us to 13, senior staff reports. 13.1, Scott Saywell, regarding the strategic plan, a term in review.
Yeah, thank you and good evening. A special good evening to the newly elected trustees who are with us tonight. Oh, we can show up. Okay, great. Just wondering about that. You can do both. Well done. That's Karen, everybody. Thank you through you, Charlene. It's been so the idea this evening, by the way, was to share just a short presentation. Secretary Treasurer Walsh, Deputy Superintendent Tate, and myself decided this was a good way to celebrate, I guess, in a way, this board's last board meeting. So I'll say to begin with, it's been a privilege to serve with this board as superintendent over the last 4 years. There's been a lot of good work completed. And again, we wanted to share that a little bit. This slide you've seen many times. And I've shown it dozens of times over the last 4 years as a way to ground us in our work. This little girl starts kindergarten this year. She will graduate in 2035. She is filled with promise, possibility, and hope. I wonder what the future holds for her. 2018, when this board started, I had something different to say. I'm not sure. We've never been in more challenging times. It was a much simpler comment back then about worries of her parents, and we weren't talking in the same way about pandemics and climate action, climate change, severe weather patterns, war, things like this division we have now, us versus them, this political divide. We weren't worried about those things. Artificial intelligence, automation, those sorts of things are still on the horizon. But as an education system, we have to prepare this little girl for the future. And that's our challenge. So that's our setting again. Slide, thanks.
Right here.
Oh, I can, okay. Oh, for this one. Yeah, thank you. Well, you're doing that one, I'm doing this one. Gotcha, thank you. In 2018, I did show this exact presentation, and I wanted to take just a few minutes to bring us back to where you were when we started. The new curriculum was just coming in for K to 9. 2016, 2017 was the first year. And we were preparing for what was called the Big Idea curriculum back then, which the whole idea was that there was curricular content, and there was also core competencies. I'm gonna come back. The whole idea at this time was that when information is everywhere and at your fingertips, well, what do you do in education? When you don't need to go anywhere any longer to learn something, what do teachers do? Well, teachers have always done a lot of great things rather than just supply students with information. But we did need a change. And we needed to change that had us looking more at core competencies. So things like creative thinking and personal and social skills. And this is where the curriculum has gone in the last number of years. We hear from, when you look at a whole bunch of surveys, you hear the same things from employers. They're looking for people with creativity and adaptability over and over again. And so we're trying to put that into the curriculum and have been doing so for the last number of years. The research has also been very clear that, and consistent over the last 30 years, collaborative cultures in which teachers focus on improving their teaching practice, learn from each other, and are well led and supported by school principals result in better learning for students. Only better teaching will improve our outcomes. That's always been true. So the way a teacher interacts with the content and a student, kind of a three-legged stool, is what will always improve outcomes for students. It's the same then and it is now. That's a slide I showed, I think, for the first time. This slideshow comes from November 2018. It might have been the first slideshow I presented to the board. You can't, I wanted to talk a little bit about context back then. And again, I've shown this slide. Trustees will recognize it a number of times over the years. And what it suggests is this is a composite of indicators of children at risk. And so if you look, I hope you can see it okay. If you look on the left-hand side of the slide, you can see Nanaimo Ladysmith is number 13. So the first on the top there is Prince Rupert. As a school district, they are the most vulnerable school district in the province. They have more vulnerabilities than any other district in the province. This study was a few years ago, but you'll notice something interesting. We're number 13, but every other district, almost every other district on that list of children at risk are small districts with a high number of Indigenous students. We're kind of an outlier, you know, we're the only really large city on that, certainly in the top 13. And it's the same for youth at risk. And so this is, in this case, we're number 9. And again, you see all of those same small districts ahead of us and a little bit behind us. So the suggestion is, of course, that on these, I'm not going to go through unless you ask later about the indicators, each one. This is a composite of all of those indicators that are on that list. Another way we can see vulnerability, and the results are exactly the same as that, which is from a BC Stats information. And we've talked a great deal about this, the EDI. And students who are vulnerable on one or more scales, you can see here in Nanaimo, were around, at this time, we were around 34% overall, which means that 34% of the students entering kindergarten have one or more vulnerabilities and the vulnerabilities are on the right-hand side. The range goes in the province from 53% down to 9%. So very affluent communities wouldn't have that much in the way of vulnerability. All of the districts ahead of us were the same districts, more vulnerable, were the same ones on that previous list. So this is what the board came into, and this is today, or recently. This is the 7th wave, so it's been updated. And what's kind of really stark in comparison between those two is that the darker the area, the more vulnerable. You can see in the area of Cedar, Wellington, Gabriola area, this area here. And what's interesting about that area, it is one of the most vulnerable areas in the province. Only the east side of Vancouver and the west side of the island, actually, and they're close, but are more vulnerable. So, and what happened during that time, by the way, on this wave, was that Quam Stalipo came online. So all of those students that were previously in the band run school are now in the school district. And then I shared at the time graduation rates. So always thought comparisons are the thief of joy. But I did share this back then to show that at least in my mind, and I hope in yours as well, that we were underperforming. So on the island, we had one of the lowest graduation rates, and we've increased that over the last 4 years of this board. And here are our present rates. Again, I've shown this slide a few times. What it shows is our range of completion rates, graduation rates and completion rates. We use them interchangeably. But you can see the range is the long tail, and the little dot is the most recent 2020, 2021. So you can see in all cases, we're at our highest graduation rates in the history of the school district. Learning Services talks quite a bit about why that is, and the board can surmise. I can share a few of my thoughts. Few things have changed over the last 4 years, not the least of which is we returned to contract language that saw Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools gain 107 FTE teachers in 2017. I bet that has some influence on our grad rates. I believe that our work on truth and reconciliation has some effect on our grad rates positively. I think as I shared earlier, the big idea curriculum has had some effect on graduation rates. The ministry has eliminated essentially exams, final exams for students. I know that has had some effect on grad rates. So all of these things have contributed in some way, but we're happy to be where we are. That was just a somewhat shortened version of the presentation I showed in 2018, but I jumped to the end here, and I know trustees have seen this slide as well. I typically end my presentations with this slide as well. So the quality of a school or a school district as a learning community is best measured by how effectively it addresses the needs of struggling students. I've said that often. The Learning Services Department says this often. Kindergarten teachers know the vulnerable students in their class. There are students who are from low socioeconomic situations. They are students who are new to our country, and they are Indigenous students. Not all of them, but lots of them. And so we've appealed to teachers and staff members, support staff, to pay a little more attention to the students who need us most. And I think that has also helped us focus on those students and improve outcomes. This is where this board came in 2018 and took the better part of a year to come up with the present strategic plan, which led to those 4 district review stories, and most recently, the Enhanced Student Learning Report. We've had kind of 2 Enhanced Student Learning Reports, but this is the first year that we've separated them, and that'll be a conversation for the new board to discuss how we go forward with that. Essentially, we have a strategic plan, and we have these 3 operational plans, essentially, that do the work, that staff do the work of the strategic plan. So you see the Department of Learning Services, they have their operational plan. Corporate Services, which Secretary Walsh oversees, is involved, of course, in the long-range facilities plan. He's going to talk about that in a second, as well as Environmental Stewardship Action Plan, which is rather new to us, but will be serving us well over the next few years. With that, I'll hand it over to Secretary Treasurer Walsh.
So superintendent said that comparison is the thief of joy. And I would say in the context of the long range facilities plan, that's unless you're Nanaimo Ladysmith. And I say that because our plan is not only award winning, which we'll be coming to talk to the board about pretty soon here, but it's also being compared very positively provincially and is used as a template. Not only did it incorporate the community's feedback in what they're wanting to see with respect to seismic safety, addressing the enormous growth of our region, it also provided some active steps to alleviate these issues. And so the North End consultation, which will have an outcome coming soon, Ladysmith is. And the other thing about the plan that is a real success is that the ministry's eyes are on Nanaimo Ladysmith. There's just no doubt about it. We've got support for what will be the largest capital project, Ladysmith Intermediate, when we finally get going, the district has ever had. Now, Wellington, if you include inflation, is probably bigger, but for dollar, it will be large. It's well respected. It's supported by reasonable enrollment projections, and I think it's a very easy to read document for our public. The other thing that it did, and again, I would say that it comparable to our peers, it really helped us institute a school site acquisition charge in a way that I could say, compared to some of the reactions I've had from municipal partners in previous experiences, there is just no question that the needs of our district are there, and we're now collecting dollars as our community develops to get future sites. So very positive on that front, and I think a big success of this board was the achievement of this plan. Of course, we've got our electric buses. And so here we just wanted to lay out some of the successes of, from the corporate service side at least, of this board. And so you'll start to see here support for outdoor learning program or projects. And so that's ongoing. Electric buses, we're going to be up to 33% of our fleet is going to be electrified, and we'll have done that in a matter of 3 years. I think we'll be the front of the pack. Oh, no, Victoria's going to beat us now because they only have 2 buses in their entire fleet. But from a district with a sizable fleet, we will be significantly electrified, saving huge amounts of money. Solaire and Pleasant Valley both now complete seismic upgrades, not only on time but under budget. Hammond Bay, large expansion to support French immersion as well as North End seats in our district. Reasonable budget, not so much on time, but again, the project is coming along. Expansion at Dover Bay. When we think about COVID-19 and we think about the challenges that some districts are facing with trying to get appropriate ventilation, our district is essentially finished. Ladysmith Intermediate being the one last school without mechanical ventilation. So not all this board, of course, but I think a success to give confidence to our community. Learning studios. So we are revamping old portables, using our students and our staff to create learning studios that are now, when you go to schools, you hear about how those are the facilities that teachers fight over. Air conditioning doesn't hurt, of course, but certainly the quality of the builds are there. And the list goes on, the expansion of childcare. So we will be having some ribbon cutting, maybe the old, some of the, I was going to say old trustees, the outgoing trustees will be able to come join us. But so our staff have built childcare facilities to expand seats at Forest Park is done, Chase River is nearly done, Ladysmith is done or on its way, and then there's a number of others coming. We're looking at going to an electrification and decarbonization, and every single project, the board has stepped forward with capital dollars to try to make what was a decent project better. And so we think of Cedar, we think of Solaire, we think of Pleasant Valley, just significant movements on the climate change front. Working with our sustainable partners at QQS, we're building a childcare facility with our staff on the reserve lands. So that's pretty important as well. So huge successes on that front. On the financial front, I would say that this district, from what I've seen in my time, has been able to provide incredible stability from a financial perspective to our staff and our students for the full term of the board, frankly. Now you, of course, inherited increasing enrollment, so your stewardship is not the sole explanation for that, but certainly it is a part of that as well. And we're not a district that operates in a structural deficit. So when there's investments, they're hopefully going to be able to continue, and we're not looking at surpluses to kind of make our way on a yearly basis. So that predictability is a very positive thing. And then the other thing I would say is that the policy committee, I think, needs to be recognized for its work as well, proactively addressing policies, which actually also pushes staff to proactively address administrative procedures as well, because we know many of them are out of date, contain nomenclature or things we don't even do anymore. And so it's important to our public that what we say we're going to do is what we do, and change the policies if it's not the way that we do business still. And then finally, the other one, just the IT, the idea that this district has supported access to technology for students, and particularly given kind of our experience in COVID and our move to use technology as a tool, that was just impossible in schools that didn't provide Wi-Fi and access to technology in an equitable and meaningful way. So teacher can't use this effective tool if they don't actually have the infrastructure to support it. And this board has done that year after year after year. So we are 17 schools complete of our Wi-Fi upgrade project, number of others in progress. And of course, I'm not going to do the math right now to see how many there's left, but we're optimistic that we've got close to enough left in the local capital fund to be able to support that. So a lot of successes to reflect back on.
And good evening. Continuing on, I'll just pause for a quick moment just to say hello. I am Laura Tate, for those of you I haven't met or just recently met, and I'm happy to be here with you tonight, all of you. So continuing on the same theme, I'll highlight from the learning side, from the Department of Learning Services operational plan, just to highlight a few things that we're quite proud of and that I'm hoping that you're very proud of over your last 4-year term. And one of those is the co-governance of Quanquam-Stewiquich. It's one of its only kind here in the province. We are making our way through problem solving, learning, and living together on the traditional and unceded territory of the Snuneymuxw people. And the school is running well and in good hands, and we're all learning together as we make our way through this venture. Additionally, Mark's mentioned childcare. As you know, the Ministry of Education is now called the Ministry of Education Childcare. It's a big endeavor. We're extending our mandate of K to 12 to include 0 to 5. So we have lots happening in this regard. We've got before and after school care to contend with, which has been a massive undertaking with our facilities department. We have seamless day pilot that we're piloting with early childhood educators in classrooms with kindergarten teachers. Childcare on its own is a big endeavor. 0 to 3 and 3 to 5 and infant and toddler is a whole new area for us to contend with. So it's just starting, and we're making our way through that. And I'll also highlight another secondary project that we have, which is we've partnered with the Take a Hike program, which is a beautiful program that gets kids outside, outdoor education, coupled with the clinical psychologist. It's a beautiful partnership, and again, it's doing what we think is best for kids and creating creative pathways to graduation. That's one. And so you are well aware of your own strategic plan, and that strategic plan, your purview, of course, is creating a mission and vision and extending that to goals and objectives. And then with, keep going. The operational side of things. So staff responsibility, as you're well aware, are creating strategies to advance your goals and objectives and the metrics that go along with those strategies. And so from your strategic plan, of course, comes, as the superintendent mentioned, 3 other documents that bring detail and activation to the board's strategic plan. And one of those 3 is the Department of Learning Services strategic plan or action plan. And you can see that we've got many actions and that respond to the objectives. That's the operational plan that you see scattered across the page there. And we move from objectives to strategies and actions to project plans that go more and more into detail. And wrapped around all of that is what we're calling organizational leadership. It's just really important to take a moment to acknowledge that in addition to bringing the board strategic plan to life, we're also running the day-to-day operations of a school district and of schools, which will contain myriad things such as budget management, HR, recruitment, labor relations, performance management, community parent liaison, and on and on. So it's important to remember that that is wrapped around all of the efforts that go also toward the board strategic plan. So I'll take just a moment. I'm going to dive a little deeper with you here. And what you see is just an example of how all the departments, but in this case, Department of Learning Services, regards a goal, the board strategic goals. You'll see 2 at the top here. I'm going to focus with you here on the strategy, but the strategy that's being undertaken by the Department of Learning Services hits both of the goals that you see there. And it pertains to the objective that you see here. And it's created the strategy of deepening our understanding of and personalization of diverse pathways to graduation. So that's the strategy. And further to that, you'll see an example of the actions, and further to that, project plans that will help us to achieve this strategy. So we'll be looking at understanding what pathways currently exist at each secondary school or program, both traditional and innovative pathways. We'll also be planning to maintain those traditional pathways because many students do well in these traditional pathways, but we'll also be looking to create a plan to maintain the innovative pathways at a school and then grow them to other schools. So that's just an example of one strategy of many within the Department of Learning Services and the process through which we will achieve the board strategic plan goals. Along with that come the metrics, of course. I'm going to segue a tiny bit and just have you focus a little bit to the left of the slide there under the nice bright red flag. We've been inspired lately, as you know, by a book called Street Data, which I've mentioned before, which is co-authored by Shane Saphir and Jamila Dugan. And the book is called Street Data, and the street level data, and I'm putting it in a very sort of cursory, summary way. I don't do it justice in any way. But the street level data is what we would know to be that school-based data, anecdotal stories, formative assessment data, all the beautiful quantitative, qualitative data that exists at the school and classroom level. The map level data moves up a tiny bit, and that's more at your sort of school level, where the school leadership team might aggregate that data from the classrooms and use that data to inform their school plans, their school goals. They'll disaggregate the data to look for demographic trends, etc. And then as we move up here, we get to the satellite data. And the satellite data is the purview of the district and the board. And that's, again, pulling up and aggregating that data from the schools to get a district picture to inform the decisions that are made at the district and the board level. And then on the right, you'll see the typical examples that you will see over the coming years around the satellite data. For the most part, the objectives will be measured against and shown to you against this satellite data. There are a few anomalies, of course, depending on the specific objective and strategy, but for the most part, we'll be sharing with you regularly the data from the Student Learning Survey, data from the Foundational Skills Assessment, or the FSAs, graduation rates, transition rates, and report card marks. And you'll see that a fair part of them come in the fall, with the FSA, some FSA data coming to us in the winter, and report card marks come to us currently either twice a year for linear or elementary and some 8s and 9s, or twice per semester. We do have some reporting changes on the horizon, but we'll leave that for another meeting. And so not only will you receive that data as it comes available to us, but you'll also see that data in context as we use it to align with our objectives and our strategies in the strategic plan. So what you can expect at our education committee meetings are reports around the objectives, the metrics that align with those objectives, a little bit more detail on the strategies, and you'll have reports, presentations from schools and how they are bringing to life the board strategic plan in the school and in our classrooms. Thank you for your time.
Is it
Like 9 clickers going on at once.
Thank you. I feel like we needed some kind of slide that said, Charlene, it's over, because I was still ready to listen to more.
Okay.
Thank you. So thank you for the presentation, and thank you for all of you that shared with us this evening. Speakers list. If you have any questions or comments, thoughts, Greg?
Yes, just coming to a close as this board, I just wanted to thank staff for all of their hard work on, all the achievements that we've seen here. Couldn't have been done without all of you. So I just want to say thank you for that.
That's great. What else? Jessica, go ahead.
I'm not gonna stop. Okay, that's lots of information. I'm gonna, I guess for some reason it's the recency effect. I'm gonna go with one of the last things I heard. So through this year to when you talk about, you said objective metrics, set strategies in schools, and that's what we can expect, or what the new board can expect here at the education committee. In my mind, I hear a bit of a change, and I'm grateful for that change. And so I like what you said, and almost in a sense of laying out a plan about how we're going to talk about things differently. And that's something that this board has really tried to, encourage conversation around, encourage exploration of, fundamentally, evidence-based decision-making, using data to evaluate, efficacy, trying to, I guess I'm saying this to you guys in ways like trying to, from that balcony oversight level, have data and information given to us so we can understand what, is happening in schools and what strategies, so we can help, do an oversight evaluation of, A, is it working? What are you doing? Is it working? And what is it that we need to fund and or change, right? So I want to make sure that, or do a check-in fundamentally that you are more about where you're at with regards to the support you need to get the metrics that we've been asking for. And I hope that question makes sense. I know you've been in pursuit of data. Where is the Department of Learning Services at in their creation or access to that data?
I cannot believe I remembered
I'm
to.
the worst person asking short questions, so do not model that behavior. So.
Thank you. Great question. And I will invite Secretary Treasurer to join me in that we are co-leading this initiative together with support of our IT department. So we have just run it. We've got a concept plan going. We've got a small committee going to look at the scope and sequence. And Mark has laid out a beautiful sort of 1, 2, and 3 year plan. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Through you, Chair. So thank you, Laura. And so, yeah, what we've done is we've decided to take a little bit of a step back and take it from an IT level as phase 1. And so what we're doing is we're saying to Learning Services, tell us, let's start with all of the data points that we're going to have accessible. So we've now got that. I think they're all in the right spot to start accessing. But then we're now in the process of building how the data points are going to be accessible and to who. So they need to be appropriate to the end. Like we don't need, a principal doesn't need access to over here and Learning Services needs access to over here. And then we're going to see the functionality to check, number 1, if there's sufficient data points or if there's something lacking, as in, oh, we have it, but we haven't incorporated it into our system that we're building, or alternatively, we don't have it at all and it's a big gap. And so now we need to address that. It's a bit longer of a term. Once we have that and the filterability, then the questions are going to start to be put into the system. So that's when the how are kids in grade 5 at X doing, or how are kids in grade 5 in this demographic doing. So we're going to take all of those aspects and make it as filterable as we possibly can. And so our goal is to have the data is already there. Then now we need to set up the parameters of accessibility, and then we're going to start the filtration to be able to have the data reporting. And so that's our goal, is to have that done. It was initially January, but I think it's going to be a little bit further back. And then it'll be the questions, and then will be the correlation, like how we build a system that's going to be able to give us the warning signals to recognize when data sets are telling us that a kid's not going to be successful, as an example. So, but that's stage 3. So, and so I think it's the kind of the joint infrastructure and learning coming together to build that system. And we're a little bit further along actually than initially I suspected.
And we'll wrap back around from that beautiful description, very IT-ish, to look at, and what our Department of Learning Services overarching inquiry here is through the lens of JEDI. So when we were looking at data, when we were trying to utilize data, the kinds of questions we're asking of the data, are we looking at that through a lens of justice and equity and diversity and inclusion? I don't know the answer to that. It's causing more questions right now than answers, but it's bringing awareness and more questions, which I think is a good thing. Follow up?
I just want to say that that's really important foundational work. Because that means you're building real foundational, like infrastructure level, foundation from which to build a house in which we tell stories.
Mhm.
And those stories help us better understand the kids. So I'm thrilled to hear those you're pouring this in. Really excited. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Stephanie?
Thank you. We got through an entire presentation on our term, and I only actually saw the word COVID, which actually was a considerable amount of our term, and I think derailed a lot of the, exciting ideas that we had about our strategic plan when we were envisioning it. And so, because the superintendent talked about the importance of the learning transformation, and I think even unintentionally talked about it even more when you talked about the changing world that exists, that our students are going to be inheriting. How are we evaluating the impact that COVID has had on our ability to move forward with the learning transformation? Because it sure, my observation, and I think we've seen it in the data, is that it sure threw us back a bit. You were in the classroom, kids were in individual rows and working on individual worksheets. It was like going back in time. But it's so critical to make sure that students are successful when they graduate. So how have we evaluated that? And sort of what impact did it have, and how are we working to overcome that moving forward? If that's an answerable question. I guess, like, drilling it right down, what impact has COVID had on our ability to move forward with the learning transformation? How do you know that? And what are we going to do about it?
How do we know that? I feel like at the moment, kind of on the spot, it feels anecdotal right now. I'm sure it isn't if I had more time to sort of process through a response here, but my colleagues can agree or disagree or jump in here, but my sense is that the learning transformation has picked up speed. I think COVID has illuminated so much for us. It has worsened a lot of things, I would say, in some regards, and therefore bringing it more to the forefront, and making us all the more aware of the need for doing things differently. Absolutely. I think we hustled in COVID at good, bad, and ugly and all those sorts of things. And I would say that right now that feels somewhat anecdotal, but I can list off, hours of evidence of what I am seeing and what the impacts of COVID have been at every grade level, particularly with our really little ones. The little ones coming into kindergarten now, or having had come into kindergarten last year, and you're well aware of this, having not maybe had opportunities to socialize in childcare settings, in preschool settings, not having had wraparound support by our community agencies, and then having the communication to school districts ahead of time, and then what we're seeing. And so we have no choice right now but to problem solve and to brainstorm and to try things in our classrooms, in our schools across the district that we never would have considered. And I think we're being forced in that direction to really look at that. I do think, though, we still do need to stand back on the balcony and look at education overarchingly, not just in the crisis mode, but in education across the board. And we were doing that today actually as a team, and looking at some of the barriers and the structures and systems that exist, and some that we don't have control over, that cause us to, what's the term, sort and categorize. There's still so much in our education system that is a stronghold from 1781 or 1889, and we are very well aware of that, and we're feeling excited and overwhelmed, I think, all at the same time. I'm not quite sure if I've answered that to your satisfaction, but
I think it was a tricky question. I think what's critical that I've heard from you is the importance of taking a balcony level view on a system which is, I think, the work that this board's going to inherit. That is the job of the board, is to make sure that somebody has the ability to take that balcony level view, to move the system where it needs to go and to understand what the system needs. And so what I'm hearing from you is there's a lot of work to do as a result of COVID, both on student interaction, on student achievement, but my question was directed at the learning transformation. And what I got from that answer was that that's kind of down the list right now because we are in rapid response mode still. And having the ability to be at the balcony view and look at the system is critical to what our students are going to need as they graduate into a changing world. So thank you.
Thank you. Naomi.
Yeah, I just, when I was looking at the different assessment tools that were mentioned, that were listed, and then I'm really glad that that question was asked about the IT development. That's really exciting. So what I want to ask is, given we're looking at developing that, I saw FSAs up there, and I wanted to know, are we going to stop using FSAs for measuring where a student is at, given the conversations we've had about the reduction in participation in these tests in the district, making it less meaningful in terms of a measurement tool? I know that's been mentioned in other presentations, and if we're developing this data collection technology, perhaps we could look at not using FSAs because participation rates have decreased drastically. Just a curiosity.
Well, maybe I'll start, and maybe Jackie or Laura can jump in. We're mandated by the Ministry of Education and Childcare to keep going with the FSAs, and so as a district, that's what we'll continue to do. Our challenge is, of course, you've mentioned that with so few students doing it, it's hard to glean any good information from that data. We were around last year collectively around under 60% for sure, and on some individual assessments, in the high 40% participation rate. So yeah, that presents a challenging proposition for us. Absolutely. I don't know if there's anything to add, but we're mandated to continue. So yeah, thanks.
Just the one thing to potentially add is when we're looking at the filters, and assuming we can get it right, it will be very interesting though, because when we gave that example, we want to isolate all grade 5s in demographic X. Then we'll be able to say, here, use these assessment tools, FSA and report card data. And then we're trying to get it so you can yank FSA and see the same cohort and put it back in. So we'll get a very good sense of the value of those tools, assuming the report card data is going to be valuable to us. So we'll be able to, I guess, proof of concept whether the numbers are sufficient to be able to assume uptake rates in FSAs are useful for us right now.
Do you have a follow-up, Naomi? Okay. Thank you. Jessica?
Well, actually turn on my microphone, which I was going to call a microwave. Sorry, Naomi, that you couldn't hear me and everyone else. I just, I don't know, so through the chair to our deputy superintendent, Laura Tate. Laura, your words today, I don't know, they're hitting me hard. Hustled through COVID feels like the phrase of our whole term. And that's taking credit for something I didn't really do. I feel like our staff had to hustle through COVID. And I want to acknowledge that and thank you all, because I know that this has been a crisis time, and the board was buffered from that because we weren't in the trenches. So I just want to acknowledge, the staff for having to hustle through the crisis. And I hear the crisis is still, the system is still in crisis. Whether the crisis is over or not, well, that one might be. We have lots of others as we started off the presentation. So I guess and I do have a question, but I am thinking from a strategic plan perspective. We came into this term thinking that, it was all, wine and roses, and we created a beautiful strategic plan and we were going to go forth, and then boom, we got whacked with a pandemic. And you had to hustle through COVID. So I'm wondering if you have, and it's not just it's really for any staff, but does the system need anything to get out of that crisis mode, right? Because COVID put us into crisis and our bodies are still in crisis because that's what we did to survive. And so now the system needs to, as much as possible, do this deep breath that I just heard from my partner next to me at the table, that cleansing breath, or to calm down. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about what the school district needs to get out of that hustle mode or crisis mode. And I'm thinking with regards to a strategic plan, do you simply just need time to work on what you wanted to work on? I've been trying so hard to work on it, to settle down. Or do you need purposeful focus on a specific aspect so you can settle the system into more of a competency mode rather than a crisis mode?
It's a wide open question. Who wants to go first? Mark, then Laura?
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
You were too long.
Then I'll-
No, too late.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Mark.
Through you, Chair. So, one of the things that Scott mentioned in his memo was the idea that potentially of a standalone human resources plan to really highlight there's certain objectives that the board already has with respect to human resources. But when we think about recruitment, retention, and mental health, those are three things that are probably going to be more front and center as the strategic plan gets updated. And maybe that's a plan on its own. Maybe that's not, maybe it's not, but it's certainly one of those things that I think that a big focus is inevitably going to come on as we start trying to come out of the crisis. So.
Thank you.
Go ahead. No, I was formulating, thanks, it was purposeful. We didn't mention COVID, but we put it, and it's been the better part of 2.5 years. I mean, I think Mark kind of nailed one of the things, but I think, the Learning Services Department has dedicated a lot of time to that trauma-informed practice and understanding mental health issues in both staff and students. And we appreciate the compliment, but I'll extend that to really our frontline workers, our teachers and support staff in classrooms. They were remarkable during that time, like really and truly remarkable. And so they helped us through. It's a great question, and you'll have us pondering further after this meeting. Thanks.
First, I'll say thank you for asking that question. That feels very kind to be asked that question. What do you need, or how can we support? So I'll just say that. The strategic plan is one of the most amazing plans I've ever had the pleasure and honor of working with. So I think keeping, it hits all, it zooms in, it pulls back out, it's focused on teaching and learning, but it also focuses on the world around us. I think keep that pathway is I think what I would say in that regard. Time, absolutely. Time, we need to dance floor, Zoom back balcony, dance floor, Zoom back balcony, so we know when we're making the right decisions. And then I guess humbly, maybe I would maybe mention advocacy. I'm not sure if, I wonder if, you know, the ministry, et cetera, is aware of what schools in the province, the impact of COVID and what that looks like, sounds like, feels like for a grade 1 teacher in a garden variety classroom right now.
Thank you. Paula? Chantel and Stephanie?
Thank you. I'm just gonna kind of, take liberties, I guess, Chair, Shirley,
Go ahead.
everyone, because it's not, I appreciate that question as well. And certainly when you were providing your answer, Laura, I was thinking of not just the impacts to students, but staff across the district. And, you know, I don't want to answer for staff, but because I'm leaving now, and this is a bit of an emotional meeting, seeing all the pieces that have been brought together over the years, not all in our term, but continuums, and now there will be some further continuums. As I would say, if anything, I would gift to the district, it would be some allowances for exactly having navigated the crisis. And agree, and glad you see it that way, that the strategic plan is a place to manage some of the good work that needs to be done and be consistent. I jotted down a couple, you know, there's a lot of external pressures that we face, things that come up that are out of our control, and having that steady path to follow, I think, is really important. I also want to share, and I had to Google and double check because I read this, or didn't read the book, but read bits of the book, and it stuck. This is going years and years back. Author by the name of Thomas Homer Dixon, and this has always stuck with me. And it's this idea of that as society, we have to sometimes take our foot off the gas pedal, and that's how I feel a lot of the time when I see the struggles that many of our staff face, our students, our families. Everybody's facing. I certainly face that in my personal work as well. And, you know, people assume that, well, we all made it and survived the COVID, but there's real implications that none of us can see, but we're starting to see. And so nothing, I don't think, is going to none of us can have the solution, but we can allow for time and allow for us to flush out some of these processes that are in place, right? And maybe not put as much on our to-do list as we would have in the past, because I also really believe that when we focus on one thing and do it really well, we're better off for it. So I don't know, parting words of outgoing O'Neill.
Thank you.
And thank you for all this report and the sharing tonight too, because it makes me a little emotional.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Thanks. So I have a question, but I'll just also provide a bit of an FSA update that the province is currently undertaking the third round of what was called AGPA, the Advisory Group on Provincial Assessment, where all partners, education stakeholders and rights holders are at the table talking about creating a broader assessment plan. We have a number of system-wide assessments that were created separately from each other and are not cohesive. So it's about a cohesive assessment plan. There is a very strong agreement at that table that there is a need for quality and reliable system-wide information. And that table involves every single stakeholder and rights holder that is recognized. And for folks who wonder about the value of that information, there was a letter written on November 18th, 2021 to Minister Whiteside from the First Nations Leadership Council that outlines how much they rely on the information found in the FSAs. And I'll also remind us that we have a requirement of the BC Tripartite Education Agreement to to report out on FSA data because it is information that is very useful to the First Nations Leadership Council and the First Nations Education Steering Committee in their advocacy for First Nations students across the province. That's not my question. My question is, recognizing the difference, Superintendent Saywell, that you showed on the EDI, the Early Development Index. I'm trying hard to say all of the acronyms because this is an acronym gig. Holy cow. The Early Development Index, the change that you showed was quite jarring in the level of vulnerability over the few years we've been here, which I think I don't know the right words to say this, but it was almost a relief to see that because it's something we've all felt and we've heard from the people on the ground in our schools. So to see that someone has found a way to measure that and say, yes, you're not crazy, this is actually happening, but it's also really heartbreaking and horrible. My question though is, you also showed where the district sat on the vulnerability index early in the term with wave 6, we were sort of number 13. And so my question is, and this dates back to what you were talking about with advocacy, my question is, where do we sit now? Has that shift in vulnerability, that increase on the EDI, moved us up? Or is everybody in the province also seeing the colors just get darker on their vulnerability index? Because either one of those requires a certain level of political advocacy that our board's going to inherit, but knowing which one is important, because they're two different focuses of advocacy. One is about focusing on provincial vulnerability and finding better ways to fund that vulnerability. Community Link has been recognized as being outdated, but we couldn't land on something before when they tried to do the funding model review. So if it's provincial, we need something, and if it's local, we need a different thing. Do you know the answer to that?
Yeah, I do.
Yay.
Yeah, I think so. Are we getting more vulnerable? Yes, in some neighborhoods, and getting less vulnerable in others. But overall, just a little bit more. So we're at 37%, but that's the last wave. Wave 8 is coming out in a year or so, Jackie. Next June, next year, yeah. So some of our neighborhoods, the one I pointed out, Cedar, is quite vulnerable, and I mentioned we have again some of the most vulnerable neighborhoods in the province. But as an overall vulnerability, 37% puts us about like a 10. But again, every district ahead of us is a small district with a high Indigenous population. We're sort of an outlier on that vulnerability scale. So yes, for a district our size, a city our size, we're very vulnerable.
My follow-up to that would be, as we're all using our current platforms to be the outgoing person, is this indicates to me that that need for that funding model review to get dusted off, it does not meet the needs of our district. Our Board of Education has a requirement to advocate for the needs of our district, and there were suggestions in the funding model review that I think would have made Nanaimo Ladysmith better off from a funding perspective. And I think that perhaps under the advocacy plan that this board develops, paying some attention to this data, this sort of helps understand the importance of, reliable system-wide data allows you to do really effective and pointed advocacy for the needs of the communities that we serve, and they're changing and they're shifting, and the current funding model is not meeting the needs of our students.
Do we have any other questions from anyone on the presentation this evening? No. Thank you's been said a few times, but I'm going to take the opportunity to do my own. I think for me, when I look back at the strategic plan and I think of having a young person in the room while we develop some of our plan, and, just literally having a child in the room as we talked about our values and what we want to accomplish, what we wanted to accomplish, it really brought it to life and it made it real for us. And so when I look at the goals, objectives, the values, all of that, to be able to accomplish what we have accomplished, given the, what was the phrase you used? Hustle through COVID. That's a good one. That one might stick around for a little while. We accomplished, and by we, I'm giving credit to all of you because we didn't do the work. We came up with some ideas about what we valued and allowed those values and those goals to drive the work that you were going to do. And because you were able to take our dreams about values and goals and bring them to life, it's made a difference. We see that, we can see it in the statistics, we can see it in the accomplishments on those 2 slides that were so full. I've spent so much time worrying about COVID and worrying about students and staff and how they're doing, that the list of accomplishments has not been anywhere near the front of my mind. And so I appreciate that reminder this evening, because I've been blind to that. So thank you for the work that you've done on our behalf. And we've got a little bit of time left with that strategic plan and our incoming trustees, so that we can develop the next set of values and the next set of goals and strategic values, and see what those bring about. And there has been a continuum from the board. You know, I've sat with, this is my 3rd board that I've sat with, and there's been a continuum of work that's happened, and it's a little bit from one board and a lot more from another, and then there's what we're leaving behind, and that's moving on to the next board that's incoming. And I look forward to seeing where all of you take the next values and the next steps with the incumbents that are staying with you. That's it. I'm gonna stop talking now. Thank you. No unfinished business. I'm not going to stop talking now because it's 15.1 and it's yeah. The board annual work plan. So on an annual basis, the board meets typically during August and begins to create a draft framework for what the work of the board will be for the upcoming year. It's fireworks apparently outside tonight. I'm not distracted at all. Okay. When I first came into working with this board, I remember phoning Stephanie and saying, "What's the board annual work plan? It's in policy. There's got to be a plan out there. Where do I find this plan?" And she just looked at me and said, "It's not written down anywhere." And I went, "Oh, okay." So our board has undertaken 4 different iterations of creating a work plan that supports the strategic plan. So what is the work of the board when we're overseeing a large system? And so I have to say that this one might be my most favorite one yet. It took, I think, 2 or 3 meetings for us to bring together our experiences from the last few years, as well as our accomplishments, and then looking at a new board and trying to think of what can we set up to make your first year a little bit easier, because the fire hose is on and here we go. I did not understand that for at least the first 6 months, and then I looked back and went, "You taught us that? Okay." And then you just keep going. But this board work plan has been developed with thoughtfulness in how do we accomplish, how do we provide a roadmap for you for your first year without telling you what to do and how to do it, because that's not our place. So we were mindful of that. How do we look at what we've experienced? I think Jessica and Stephanie said it really well. And you'll notice that there's a shift between September and October to what you look at in December around the Education Committee, and it's reflective of the plan that was shared, the review of the strategic plan, where we want to have these educational discussions that talk about the board's goals, which objective we're talking about, which strategy are we talking about, and then we've heard tonight about the metrics that are being created so that we can monitor it, so that we know that what we look at this year around that goal is what we're going to look at the next time we talk about the same thing, so that we can actually see what are the metrics that we're trying to accomplish. And I think that as our board sat down and had a conversation about what types of things can we put in here that will support a new board coming in. This is the result of those conversations. We also were very intentional in leaving some of it blank. Typically within the work plan, there would also be a page for the long range facilities plan, work plan. Each of our subcommittees of our other committees will have a work plan of their own, and we would insert them in here so that there's one place where trustees can always go and look and say, what are we doing in this month, or what are we focusing on in these committees, so that we all have the same information about where we're going. And then finally, just to point out that on one page, there is an area for board advocacy that you've heard a couple of trustees talk about this evening around, you know, what should we be advocating for? And we left that blank intentionally so that the new board can come in and determine what they need to see, what they want to advocate for to support the goals that they create and the goals that they have. And so that this is a living document. It changes. It's not written in stone. If there's something in there that you're like, I don't want to learn about that, then the board can say, we're not going to do that, and let's take another look at this. And this will be a component probably of the onboarding process for everyone. So we hope that we've left you with some information that perhaps will be helpful to get you started, because it's hard to know where to begin as we transition through. And I believe that it's captured what the current trustees were hoping that it would capture for you. So I don't know if other trustees want to comment on the plan that's come together. We had several meetings. We kind of ripped it up a couple times and then started over and added more detail, but perhaps there's comment from others. Tanya?
Time to get very specific, but I think broadly for me, over the last little while, things have happened that have made me think, geez, we really should think about putting this in the plan. And it's basically a question of, okay, I'll give an example. Some questions came up about our budget timeline and our budget process. So I wouldn't mind revisiting that conversation. So we'll be doing that later with our, when we have our first meeting with the new trustees prior.
We would, and I know budget is in here. Yeah. Okay. It's in there.
Okay, cool.
Oh yeah, draft budget calendar. So November, you're diving right in. Yeah,
Good.
welcome.
Good.
So, but the process, and I think you're talking about process and policies.
Correct.
We've talked about that as well.
Yeah.
And so when the policy committee, same thing, like that's in our policy committee work plan as well. So yes, we'll be talking about it, and then we can add in different pieces. You know, the next board can add in the different pieces wherever they see fit.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
So I had a couple of comments. So firstly, I'd just like to say that I thought this was well put together. And Tanya mentioned the first one. Just I'm interested in having a conversation about the timing of the budget cycle and providing opportunities if it works within the realm of possibilities for the board to start that process earlier, so we're not being asked to pass all 3 or 4 readings at one meeting anymore. There's more time for us to consider things and opportunities for us to prioritize different items of the budget through some kind of a collaborative budgeting process. I'd really like to see that personally.
Okay.
That was, I have a couple more. Is it okay if I
Yeah, go
mention
ahead.
that? The other one, it would be great, and I know we don't always put details in here, but there's a number of resolutions, and we're going to come to our board resolutions in a minute, but is there an interest or possibility that we might pencil in sort of when we would plan throughout the year to address the known resolutions that are outstanding?
I don't see, I mean, the answer would be yes, sure, we can do that.
So
I don't know that we would want to do it tonight, but
No,
definitely
not-
flag it for.
Yeah.
Yeah, so looking at board motions that have dates on them, because not all motions have dates, so it would be the ones that are kind of like dated to come back, like September 2022 or
Yeah, and
something.
sort of where I'm coming from with this is like, for me as a trustee, and maybe some of the new ones and ones that are on, this is a great tool for all of us to know what's coming. And even if it's, you know, the deadlines for PC motions and like, rather than digging through our materials, it would be really great to have it in one spot on a work plan to know that in. someone's gonna have to help me, whatever month that is, this is when we need to submit.
Yeah, so
So-
maybe separate it out instead of it being like a monthly little piece.
Yeah.
That's what you mean? Okay.
And then one more, if I may,
Mhm.
and this one I think is for me the most important one from what we've seen during this election cycle is I'd really like to see us have some sexual health education and SOGI education, both to the board and as a broader community education initiative. And I'm not sure how we, when and how we could schedule that in, but for me, I think this is extremely important given the circumstances we're in today.
Okay. So what I would say, thank you, is that all of those things we'll flag and Karen will keep track of. And then once we dive into this as a part of orientation, we can make some adjustments and be flexible and hear from others as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Stephanie and then Chantel?
Comment on the budget request about not having to read all 3 readings in one meeting and just, we're not, it's partly because we're beholden to some really tight ministry timelines that don't necessarily jive with our collective agreement timeline. So we don't get our allocations till the middle of March. So that's when we know if we're able to stay the same. Do we have to start cut? Does our staff have to find cuts, or is there a little bit of money to maybe build in and come to the board with? And then we have collective agreement requirements for staffing that start in April. So, you know, we can carry on the budget discussion around some other things all the way through till the end of June. We have till June 30th, but there are some really tight timelines that we don't have any control over that require us sometimes to have to act quite quickly. So just keeping those things in mind.
Thank you. Chantel?
Yeah, I'm happy to park that budget one with future discussions. What I'll just say is this document is well put together, and I hope that it is helpful. I'm thinking of the many binders received when we started off our term, and this is a real, you know, it may have some imperfections, but it's a good place to start. Wishing I had a sheet like this to sort of go through at the onset of our term. So well done. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other thoughts this evening? Okay. So that is there. There's no motion required or anything like that. It is a draft for the new board to take a look at. So that moves us into for information. There is the board motions report and trustee committee reports. Were there any questions on those items from anyone? Okay. That moves us into trustee recognition. Over to Mark.
Oh, yeah. Find this very well. Okay. Right, so where's the best place to speak?
What I move?
This is the most pressure-filled part of my role to date. Well, so I actually get the honor of saying a couple of words and expressing some appreciation in the form of a framed certificate to trustees who have served on the board. So what we're going to do is we're going to provide that recognition on the basis starting with 1-termers, 2-termers, and 3-termers. And so we're going to start random draw. We're going to start with Charlie. And so and again, I'm going to take it. I'm still the newbie. You guys get to be the newbies now, but I'm still the relative newbie. So I want to express appreciation for you helping me in my role, but also coming to Nanaimo Ladysmith and seeing the functionality of this board, despite some pretty big opinions either way.
We can wait for yours. No, but some, really good advocacy and strong opinions held. You've kept this group together, and the amount of positive feedback that I think I've heard towards you from each and every member, from our community members, wow. So thank you and congratulations on the completion of a single term.
Maybe we'll do that
There's
later.
rules against the hugging. So now we recognize our vice chair for a term. And so as I think the world knows, she's off to provide her strong advocacy to another jurisdiction. But Jessica, I do want to thank you, and just to see how you are able to progress things that are important, as well as step back on occasion and say, guys, we need to stop and we just need to deal with our relationships first, because the direction it's going is not healthy, and even putting aside like what you're wanting to achieve at that moment. And so I think, again, serving this board in an incredible way with that, in addition to your knowledge. So. Greg, Business Committee Chair. So Greg, I want to say, I've seen you actually take some of the stances that the majority have said no to on a number of times, and on important issues, and the way that you respectfully advocate for your position and then frankly move on if it doesn't get accepted, again, serves this board in an amazing way. It's such an important part of the team. And as leader of our business committee, I want to thank you, because your knowledge and what you're adding to some of these important facilities, things that we're doing is quite important, and I look forward to the next term. So thank you. Yeah. Chantel. So one of the things that I've been learning, and I'm a Lady Smith, and Charlene has taught me this as well, but is embracing emotion and embracing your humanity. And so you're not only bringing your intelligence to us, but you're bringing that openness to humanity to the table every time you're here. And I don't think I've ever heard a not genuine word from you. I can't tell you how much that's appreciated. Elaine, the lady that lets us go home early. So working on here and working with you on some of the committees that you serve on and I help with, your impact by saving it until the moment it's needed, and that wisdom is there. I've never seen you participate and not be held in high esteem, and your words of wisdom taken to effect. And again, as part of a team, I couldn't. You're such an important role in that. So thank you for the term. Moving up to 2 terms. So Tanya, I'm going to come your way. So I want to say thank you for what you do here, and for everyone, what you'll see Tanya do is she will be very mindful of trying to do things the right way. Like, you've got a serious issue and you're looking for that advice, not to change your mind, but how am I going to go about this in a respectful way that's going to serve the board and serve the community? And that's just so impressive. And then the other thing is, when I came here, I thought, oh, I'm going to give Tanya a tour of the school. So we go into the school, and everywhere we go, they're like, oh, hey, Tanya, how's it going? And she's introduced me to absolutely every single person, including the kids. I was just overwhelmed by that. So thank you, sir. So Stephanie has brought a provincial lens and an insider knowledge to this district that I think has served us very, very well.
I will say, and the public is watching, but I'll say it anyway. Stephanie also is appreciated because she does have a lot of questions. And so, Elaine, you let me go to bed early. Stephanie, a little later, I suppose. But the way that you, in advance, tell us, here's the kind of thing that I'm going to look for. And it gives actually the opportunity for staff to be kind of ready. So there's no gotchas, despite, advocacy and oversight. So appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing it. And so we have 3 terms. So, Mr. Robinson. So when I started here, one of the things that I'd heard a little bit about, of course, Scott talked a lot about this, is truth and reconciliation and what a focus is on the school district. And wherever I do go, and whenever I do talk to people, and this is a fundamental thing in our district, and I know Stephanie played a big role too, but Bill, your role in furthering truth and reconciliation in the district and the relationships that you've built in this district in classes, but as well as with our partners, it's had such a meaningful impact. And so I've got to see that and got to learn, and I have a lot of learning left to do. And so I want to recognize that and how long and what a force you've been on the board. And you also get 3 terms of service.
Thank you.
At the end of the next term, it's the superintendent that gets to do that job. Awesome.
All right. Ms. Matthews, are there any questions this evening? So with no questions, we'll move for an adjournment. Motion by Greg and seconded by Tanya very quickly. They're trying to be like Elaine and get us home early. Any objection? Okay. And,
Yeah.
oh, yeah. So we're adjourned at 7:43.